Welcome, everyone. Today, the CPA, the Association for Contract Packagers and Manufacturers, is pleased to present Stutz Packaging, how a co-packer rolled out ERP without the chaos. This session is a case study that shows that the normal stress, angst, confusion, and mistakes don't have to be a part of rolling out a new ERP system. I'm John Maslin, your host for this session, and I've been involved with the CPA since the mid-1990s. Because we have a mix of CPA members and non-members in the audience, let me do a short synopsis of the Contract Packaging Association. The CPA has been promoting the growth and welfare of co-packers, co-manufacturers since 1992 through industry exposure and networking programs. CPA members include some of the leading partners to CPGs and brands in the country. The association serves as the connection point for the industry through continuing education, market knowledge, and customer relationships. While there are a multitude of benefits to being a member, let me touch on just three. One, the RFQ portal and Co-Pack Connect. Everyone wants more qualified prospects. The CPA receives between 60 and 80 requests for information on projects per month through its RFQ portal. These are passed on to members who request inquiries in their appropriate categories. Co-Pack Connect, developed in cooperation with Melville and Associates, is a new platform using AI for a more dynamic, robust, and specific method of connecting the dots between someone who needs a service and someone who can provide it. Two, the State of the Industry Report. This report, also developed in collaboration with Melville and Associates, is a premier analysis of the industry. Members receive a complimentary copy of the executive summary and a discount on the full report. Summary may be a misnomer. The latest summary, currently at the publishers, is 90-plus pages and includes conclusions, reasonings, areas and locations of growth, and other market information. The full report is over 300 pages. Three, networking. Our members, once they've been involved, tell us the number one benefit is networking. If you'd like to see what they mean by networking, please feel free to join us at Cosmoprof in Las Vegas next week, Pack Expo Las Vegas at the end of September, and Engage, the CPA annual meeting in Las Vegas, February 24th through 26th, 2026. Okay, a few housekeeping items. All attendees are in mute mode. At the end of today's session, a brief survey will come your way. Please take a minute to respond. This session is being recorded and will be available to you later. For questions, please use the button to type in your query, and we'll answer as many as we can in the time allowed. Now, let's get to the substance of why you are here. Everyone has either heard of the horror stories of migrating from one ERP system to another or actually suffered through it. But this doesn't have to be. These next two gentlemen will tell you how they transition systems without all the normally associated trauma and agony. Fish and Fred, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, John. Hi, this is Vish, CEO at Power Central. And, back in 2020, I was a software engineer, a data analyst, and a data scientist. And in 2020, I wanted to really invest in a vertical. Two of my buddies here on the left side, Samir and Tariq, they actually have a food packaging plant called Pack and Fresh in Dallas, Fort Worth Metroplex. And they have the fortune of being able to grow 20% month over month during the early couple of months of COVID because of the demand for, the packaged goods. Now, these guys thought that they were quoting the customers at 45% gross margin. They should roughly end up with about 10 to 15 net margin. But what they were finding is that they were constantly losing about $30,000 to $50,000 every month. They were barely making about 25% gross margin. They really did not understand exactly where the margin was going. Sometimes the margin, they lost it during labor costs, sometimes it was machine downtime, sometimes it was tariff, sometimes it was freight costs. They really did not have a very actionable intelligence in near real time so that they can take a corrective action. So I basically went in, they really couldn't pay me at the time. So what I did is I ended up buying the share of the company. So I still co-own part of Pack and Fresh. And we sat on the floor of the warehouse and we built Power Central. And within about 6 months of using our software, Pack and Fresh went from losing $30,000 to $50,000 every month to becoming a cash flow positive company. And even right now in 2024, 2025, happy to let you know that we are a fairly highly profitable co-packing business here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. And what we learned over this journey is that the problem that Pack and Fresh has faced is very common. A lot of the companies that are between that $10 to $150 million, they don't have a comprehensive ERP that will really help them protect their margins. So now Power Central is a software company that really helps our fellow co-packers and co-manufacturers really protect their margins. And everything that we do, whether we help use mobile apps to track inventory in real time, or whether we help, we use our advanced planning systems to help deliver on time, at the bottom line is we are helping our customers, protect their margins by getting real-time visibility so that they can take corrective actions. With that, Fred, I would like to introduce you to Fred, CEO at Stutz Packing. Fred, would you like to introduce Stutz Packing as well as yourself, please?
Sure. My name's Fred Partlow. I work with Stutz Packing. There's a picture of our team. There's a couple people from accounting, procurement, quality, shipping and receiving, production, engineering, and the CEO, Bobby Stutz, on the right. Jack and Patty started Stutz Packing 2013. They've since sold the business, and Bobby's still running it. We specialize in packing dried fruits and nuts. And we had a family-run business that had Excel spreadsheets, and that evolved into Access Database. And the Access Database allowed us to grow 10 times bigger from a couple years pre-COVID to the peak of COVID. With selling the company, we wanted to invest to be able to have it grow another 10 times. And so we investigated looking into an ERP system. We decided on a Microsoft product, talked to Microsoft. They suggested 3 different partners that they had that specialized in food. We interviewed all 3 of them. We selected one. All 3 of them were the same. They all charged you $250 an hour, and they couldn't tell you how many hours it was going to take to implement it. And if you wanted to modify something from their system, they'd give you a quote, and it was more and more dollars. We did that for 13 months, and at the end of 13 months, we weren't much further than we were after the first month. At about that time, Stutz Packing was looking to partner with other packers in the country, and so we interviewed Vish's company, Pack and Fresh, and while discussing partnership of trading off products with them, they explained what ERP system they had, and we fell in love with Vish's product and had Vish come talk to us, and we terminated our contract with our previous implementer and worked with Vish as a fixed cost product. There was no add-ons, and we were very, very successful, and we're going to tell you the story of how that went. Back to you, Vish.
Thanks a lot, Fred. So just to kind of go back to what the architecture or the tech stack for Stutz was before they selected the ERP, they were actually using QuickBooks for accounting, and they were using a really good warehouse management system that was actually built by Fred himself on Microsoft Access. And it actually did a pretty good job of tracking everything from item, lot, and pallet tracking, from the receiving to the production and the shipping. It actually handled all the operations on the floor really well. Of course, because they had a separate QuickBooks systems, it required that all the sales orders, purchase orders, production orders be double entered into both of these systems. And there was some overhead in terms of keeping these systems in keeping these systems in sync with each other. And also, they did not have no mobile barcodes at that time. So obviously things were getting done on the floor, they were getting logged on paper, and then at the end of the day or end of the shift, they were getting entered into the warehouse management system or the QuickBooks system. So it all worked pretty well for as they were scaling in the first couple of years. But as they grew and they were planning to grow the next 3 to 5x in the next 5 years, they just wanted something that actually could scale, especially with more customers coming in, more SKUs coming in, the compliance and was getting much more complex. So the delay in entering the data from the time that it actually happened on the floor onto the paper and then to the WMS system, that complexity was rising. But so what? The most important thing is that because the accounting system and the warehouse management system were not really connected to each other and in real time, getting actionable insights that you could take a quick action on, that was taking longer and longer, right? So you had to really analyze the data, pull the data out of different systems and really analyze it in Excel, and that was taking a lot of time. And as they were growing, they wanted to make sure that they were relying on a much more scalable ERP, whether it be at Microsoft Dynamics ERP from Business Central, Microsoft Dynamics, and that's the ERP that they chose. And they really wanted to have something that had comprehensive financials as well as as well as the WMS capabilities. So just to kind of reiterate what Fred was saying in terms of like what they learned with the previous system, one of the challenges that most of the vendors in the Microsoft ecosystem have is they understand the ERP pretty well, but they're not really specialized in food that have out of the box experience for these mobile apps, right? So everything is like, okay, they have the capability to do it, but everything has to be done feature by feature, even the features that a typical co-packer, as we thought that, hey, this should be out of the box in the ERP, had to be built custom one by one. And the other thing was that even after building these features into the Microsoft Dynamics ERP, there were no mobile apps that the shop floor people, whether it's the warehouse person, whether it's a forklift driver, they could use on the floor with a tablet or a scan gun. So everything had to be done on the floor, and then they had to get on a computer and enter the data. The other big limitation that Fred said earlier as well is that most of these consultants worked remotely. So really there's a lot of gap between how the shop floor users actually use it versus how they design the software. So a lot of that hardships got lost in translation. And also alignment, right? Like he basically said, everybody would basically say, oh, here's a $250,000 quote, but they would all charge by the hour at the end of the day. And every customization would be another 30,000, 40,000, and the cost would just skyrocket over time. And the thing is that even after, like Fred said, 13 months after they started the engagement, nobody on the shop floor actually used the product. So it was only like the top 2 or 3 people in the company that even were engaged with that company and engaged with the product. So what did we do what did Stutz do differently with Power Central is that number one, we had out of the box mobile applications that really fit the process workflows. And also we did not try to go all in terms of like loading up all the 200 to 300 finished items and the 400 to 500 raw materials. What we did is we asked Stutz for what are the 2 or 3 high volume SKUs that are very representative of what happens on the floor. And they gave us those 2 or 3 items. We worked with them to enter those items, the bill of materials, the raw items, everything into the system. The middle management started learning how to use the ERP system. And then the floor folks actually between the time of they started engaging with us early last year. Between April to August, they focused primarily on receiving and production. So this gave them a lot of really good understanding of how things work on the floor. And not only does the middle management, like the procurement manager, production manager, but also the folks on the floor, the warehouse receiving person, the production people, they started using the mobile apps. And as they got very confident with the receiving applications and the production applications, they started loading up more items at that point of time because they knew that the applications are indeed going to work for them. And then gradually by September, November, they started doing shipping as well. So the nice thing is by December 9th, when we actually went live, and usually going live in an ERP triggers a lot of fright in a lot of food manufacturing companies because of the disruption that it caused. But happy to let you know that when we went live in December 9th, all we had to do was retake the inventory because all the packages and pallets already had the labels on them. So for a day or two, we just retook the inventory, scanned all the pallets, reset the inventory. And on Thursday morning, when on or December 9th on the morning when the shift started, nobody on the production floor or the warehouse floor really knew that they went live at all because they've been using these same apps for the last 3 to 4 months already. So, how did that happen? If you just dig into it a little bit deeper, so how did we make that happen? Number one is that the mobile applications, whether it is for receiving on the floor, shipping, the production, the staging, the shipping, all of these mobile apps were already available to the shop floor operators on day one. And this also included subtle features that a food manufacturing company needs, like allergen management, package level traceability, the ability to quarantine certain lot numbers or package numbers. All of these applications and features were already available on the mobile apps on day one. Number two is that, our engineers actually went onto the floor, and as the people were trained and using it, we were literally watching these folks on the shop floor, watching over their shoulders to see how they were using the apps and really catch subtle issues that these guys were having and confusion that these guys were having. So we literally had to tweak some 5 to 10% of our features on the mobile apps so that to make the process of data entry doesn't come in the way of their workflow. So what that really did is that it created a lot of real-time data entry. So instead of using their paper, it actually did not increase as much overhead as they were introducing this new system. What was really happening was that instead of adding their data on the paper and then giving the paper to the back office, they just used our system to enter the data into the system. So they were able to get some of these return of investments on the floor and time savings even as they were deploying the ERP month over month. So that was what was changed in the process in the 3 to 4 months that we worked with their shop floor operators, is that by the time the system went live, everybody knew what to do in production for the happy pats, not just for the happy pats, but also when exceptions happened, like, hey, I ordered this many, the vendor sent 20% above. What do we have to do? All of these exceptions were very well trained over for the last 3 to 4 months. So obviously, once they went live, what changed for Fred and management from an analytics and being able to respond to the issues happening on the floor in real time is that now they had a very real time cost per pack. I would say near real time, because by the end of the day they were able to go line by line, SKU by SKU, sales order by sales order, and be able to analyze what the cost per pack that they estimated like 6 months ago when they quoted the customer was, and what did it actually cost them to make it, and what did it actually cost them to even deliver this to the customer line by line. And this was a big game changer that they were not able to do it that smoothly back in the day. So, and also like the COGS analysis had a lot of, they were able to track everything from the raw material cost to the inbound freight to the production costs, including the labor, as well as the outbound freight. So all of these were rolled into the COGS, and they could really tell what is the true cost per pack was as it was shipping out. One of the things that I really like sharing is like when Fred asked me like, hey, one of this problem that was really hard to solve, like I want to just go deep into this one aspect that I really liked when he shared it with me, is that, like, for example, in that, with Stutz, they would quote their customer on a turnkey basis. So they would quote 6 months before the production actually happened on how much this product would cost. And one of the challenges with freight was that they would go to like 10 or 12 freight brokers and ask them for a freight rate. And then when the product really had to be shipped 6 months later, the same freight broker that gave a quote for like $1,200 would change the quote to $1,500. And there was no way to really track it saying that, hey, here's what the estimated cost per pack for freight was 6 months ago when we quoted it versus what's happening right now. And this was something that was really, really hard to do before, that they're able to do almost like in a few seconds by a few clicks of a button. And more recently, they started using our advanced planning module as well. And what this module really enables them to do is be able to plan out more weeks ahead and be able to see stock outages 3 or 4 weeks ahead of time. And because they're using these mobile barcodes to enter the data into the ERP, they can truly rely on the data that's in the ERP regarding inventory. So I wanted to just, Fred, can you please share a little bit on why do you think this worked with Power Central?
So comparing the first process where we had to use what was in the system, in the Microsoft system, we had to go into the screens and into the tabs and find the fields to enter the data. And Vish has got a handheld app, whether that's a gun that reads a barcode that's got a little screen to it, or it's a tablet. He's got an app that operates on the tablet outside and above Microsoft Dynamics, and then the app writes the data into those fields, so it's accurate. The numbers are going into the right places. You don't have to find the correct fields. That was so appealing, and basically to me, Power Central's #1 selling point versus anybody else we've ever talked to. But what's interesting is, kids love their phones and they love apps. Well, adults have gotten so used to doing apps on their phone that the first people that got to use these tablets, everybody was jealous. It's like, what are you doing? Why do you get to use an app? Why can't I use an app? So the buy-in of the folks was amazing from that process. I think 2025 is different than 2015, if you want to look at it from that perspective. But for example, receiving, we'd take in 24 pallets. We'd take the receiver. We'd have to go in the office. We'd have to manually enter all that into a spreadsheet and then print out barcodes, cut the pieces of paper in half, take the barcodes back out to the factory and find those 24 pallets and put each pallet tag on it and make sure it was the right one. Well, now with the app, you enter what you're receiving as you're taking it off the truck, and it's printing out barcodes that we're sticking on the pallets, whether that's after we've unloaded all of them or one at a time. It just depends on what process works and what we're unloading. But so the data is on the barcode right away, and the people liked using it, and so it was really easy to use. And so when Vish talked about transitioning from a test environment to a real-time environment, that was the thing we started with first. We turn our inventory pretty fast, and we said, hey, if we get the bugs out of receiving, by the time we get all the bugs out of it, we'll have used up any raw material that didn't have the new pallet tag on it. And that was pretty true. By the time we went live, we'd already received 99% of the stuff in inventory. So we had to just go out and label a couple of old pallets, and we were ready to go from a receiving point of view. I was so impressed with Vish's team, and they actually made process maps. If this happens, you do this. If that happens, you do that. And you could visually look at it. Some people are visual learners, some people are verbal learners, and some people have to do it. But having all three available to us was very, very beneficial. So when it talks about phased rollout, we went from receiving, and once we had enough inventory in the system, we went to one product and played around with the bill of materials, see how that worked, and ran it on one line. And again, the other lines were like, hey, when do we get to use that? But we started creating finished good items, and that pallet tag number that came out of Vish's system, we just used that number in our old system so we could continue to keep things going and gradually phase into the new system. And Vish's team is very good with support. When we have a problem, we teams with them or call them and text them, etc. But at every step, we made sure it was bug free before we moved on to the next step, rather than trying to try all the processes at once and then you don't know which one to fix. So we went from receiving to creating finished goods to then shipping, and that was the last one. And at that through that whole process, before you receive it, you have to purchase it. So we got purchasing and accounting involved, and then you have to be paid for it when you ship it. So those were the accounting ones along the way. So you want to go to the next slide, Vish?
Mm-hmm.
So this is kind of a summary of the headaches. The fact that we were entering receivers into Access and keeping track of the stuff, and then having to enter them into QuickBooks, the double entry went away. And the same thing with shipping. We would ship something in our warehouse management system, then we'd have to go find that sales order in QuickBooks and ship it there. The inventory levels, one was in one system and QuickBooks had another. We always had to reconcile at the end of every month. That just is a royal pain. And we talk about no more Excel detective work. What's very, very interesting is we get hundreds of sales orders in one PO. And Vish wrote an app that uploads that spreadsheet that we received from our customer and puts all the sales orders into our new ERP system. Versus in the past, we had to almost have a whole employee spend a whole day hand keying those 100 sales orders into QuickBooks. And then they had to be in another system. So again, the disconnected systems just went away with this, and the apps really help things. And he's able to customize things to your needs. He doesn't force you to do it the way he wants you to do it. The system fits our business, and it's scalable for us to grow. And as the last bullet says, we're expanding it into more planning and more quality assurance and keeping track of quality data, and then able to do analytics. So you ask a question, and then how do we figure out using Power BI to answer that question with the data? So back to you, Vish.
Oh, thanks a lot there, Fred. Really appreciate your support and your experience with sharing your experience with everybody. So again, the key takeaways here are, a lot of folks are very afraid of ERP being disruptive. ERP does not have to be disruptive. As you heard, Fred, they went one process, one SKU at a time. And you can roll out change with fairly minimal risk. And again, the main reason to really use an ERP is about being able to capture margins in near real time and be able to react to them in a reasonable amount of time, and not wait until the end of the quarter or end of the year, and be able to track all of these margins at the raw material level, labor, machine downtime, freight, and tariffs, as we're experiencing right now. And again, one SKU and one shift is enough to start, right? Don't start with the whole 1,000 SKUs and 2,000 bill of materials or whatever. You can start with like one or two SKUs that really represent a lot of your workflows, and then once it works for those key SKUs, then you can expand based on that learning. And to summarize the entire presentation here, we see like two of the biggest roadblocks to ERP adoption. Pretty much everybody knows at this point of time that, hey, if you have an ERP and an integrated financials and WMS system, you are going to be able to capture these COGS in real time. You are going to be able to help your company scale by having like a one single point of truth system where you're able to comply with SQF and all these compliance certifications. But the two of the biggest roadblocks for ERP adoption is, one is uncertain capital expense. And like what Fred said, a lot of these companies, you will get quotes if you are a 10, 15, $20 million company, you will get quotes all the way from 60,000 to sometimes even $1 million if you're like 50 to $100 million company. And then, but on top of that, they're charging by the hour. So even though they give you a quote for $200,000, by the time you're even remotely done, or you're already doing like $600,000 to $800,000, and that's what Stutz saw as well. Whereas working with us, we basically align ourselves with when Stutz grows. Like, our business model is not to make money on the installment and deployment cost. Our business model is to basically make sure that we only get paid when our customers grow profitably. So to align with that, we first give a fixed quote to Stutz. Again, this quote was actually for Stutz that we gave and not only that, but the $100,000 was not payable to us on on an hourly basis. It was based on a very clear milestone. Like for example, when all their receiving when they accepted that, hey, this receiving process really works for pretty much 100% of our items, then basically there was a milestone associated with that. When the assemblies and everything worked and their production systems, they accepted that these production apps work with their floor operations, there was another milestone, and then shipping. And then as they went live, there was another milestone payment. So in the end of the day, it didn't really matter whether we worked 100 hours or 1,000 hours. It really mattered whether Stutz was able to see the return of investment on the floor. So number one is, how do you deal with uncertain capital expense? And we've learned, to basically have our business model in a different way that aligns with our customer. The second thing is disruption to operations, as we shared in this whole presentation, is first have like people that actually go onto the floor that really understand the shop floor workers' mentality and ability to train them. And also like to do one process on one SKU at a time, so that you're not giving like a shock and awe moment to the shop floor workers that are afraid. And one of the key things that I was really excited when Fred said was that when we deployed the apps for the first line and we're doing like 1 or 2 production runs a day, the rest of the 8 production line guys were like, hey, when can we start to use those apps? So really the ERP adoption and support comes from the bottom up. And the guy on the shop floor's confidence is the operations manager confidence, and the operations manager's confidence is Fred's confidence. So that's how we build the support from the ground up. So with this, we're pretty much done with the presentation. We would like to open the floor for any questions, and me and Fred can take the questions.
Okay, so don't run off, because evidently you've stirred the pot. Okay,
All
if
right.
you will. Let me kind of start. You mentioned during the presentation cost of goods and per unit, etc. How are you allocating indirect and overhead cost into a cost per pack?
I would say we're not. We're looking at the gross margin on a cost per pack basis. How did you use your raw materials? How did you allocate your labor, the direct labor involved in making that? And what was your waste? Those type of things. Those are the daily, hourly, bags per minute. How many people do you have on the line? Those are your things you can tweak and change to adjust your standard cost or your actual cost versus your standard. And we're looking at gross margin there, cost of goods sold versus what was the actual cost of goods sold. The indirect labor and the overhead are really hard to directly go to one product or one line. So that's why they are what they are. They're indirect, and they cover across all the lines and the entire factory. And generally, it's not even hourly or shift wise. It's more, what was it for the month? So, I mean, the production manager's salary is his salary. If we run 1,000 cases or we run 10,000 cases, that would be really hard to allocate an overhead cost in that situation. You want to be looking at your variable things that you can control and manage, and make sure you're not losing your profitability on the things that you can tweak instantaneously.
Gotcha. And I think you may have answered, Fred. The second question was, how exactly does the integration with accounting work to ensure cost of goods analysis and real-time cost per pack? And for the audience, let me say, at the end of this, you will see a slide that has some contact information. So if the answer to your question develops another question, feel free to contact Vish or me with any further questions, and I'll turn you over to Vish so you can get an answer.
So I'll first comment on your last comment. Vish has introduced me to almost every person who's expressed an interest past the first level of interest. And then they can call and we tell them about real world. We did the same thing in deciding what to do. Before we met Vish, we went and actually toured facilities that had this partner, and toured in a different facility in Florida that was using that partner, and actually watched it work. Watching it work is so much better than hearing it work. And it was a good investment to do. But and then eventually, you know, after I've talked to higher level people, things, and they've got really, really specific questions, the team of the folks that I showed you in the picture do not mind sharing their very low level details of how they're actually doing the work, and because I don't know it as well as the people who are actually doing it, and I like to let them speak and share their knowledge and experience. But for us with accounting, the fact that the raw material inventory is real time, you have the costs associated with that, and it's all in one system. You can see the labor being used, you can see the product being consumed. So that's the real time impact of it, versus when QuickBooks was separated from the manufacturing system. You didn't enter into QuickBooks the production you know, tomorrow you'll enter the production what you did yesterday, and then you adjust your inventory and your books, and they never matched, so you were always changing things. So just the real time use of the system on the floor, and it being interwoven in with accounting, it gives you your real time. After the fact, we can do, how did the shift do? How did that line do for the week? How did that product do across all lines? How did the contract all work out? The data is so much better and easier to work with than what we had before in QuickBooks.
Oh, thanks for that insight, Fred.
Yeah.
Here's another one. Similar systems might not be as nimble as yours with customization tweaks. They take time and money. Tell me about your flexibility there. And that's as far as I can tell you the interpretation of the
Sure.
question.
I can read it on the screen too.
Okay.
I'll just say this: the apps came out of the box, and when we had an idea, I would call Vish to improve the app, and I have done many of these across many different industries, and I would suggest to Vish, this is one that's going to be relatable to anybody that's doing food packing. And then the next day I'd call and say, this one is pertained to us. And so they got different priorities. You know, we were willing to pay for the ones that were just for us, but if it benefited the whole system in general and he could sell it to any customer, that made sense. A simple example of that is when the operator has the tablet and they need to bring up their line and their production. You know, it's sorted by date and by lines. And we said, you know, if you reverse the order of the sort, it's easier for us. And he says, well, that makes sense to me for everybody. So he just did that. And it was a simple ascending versus descending, but that's just an example of us working together and listening and to the operators and responding to their needs. And you get a lot more buy-in if you implement simple suggestions that the operator thinks helps them, because then they'll continue to use it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that one as well, John. Usually that's what's really hard about building a product that can scale across hundreds of companies as opposed to just working with one company. And one of the things that we do, and you know, Fred has done this with our other customers as well, whenever a new request comes in, like for example, the production run report that gives like a lot of insights into like uh, how much was the shrink versus how much was the labor efficiency versus the line efficiency. It was actually a very complex report, to be honest. But the reason why we did not charge any money to, you know, Stutz was because when we talked to other companies as well, they all saw value in that. So we kind of invested in the IP, and that's how our business model works because we are incentivized to find more value to the customer, and as they grow, we grow.
Okay. I'm not sure I can. What are the costs once you fully implemented to have use of these apps?
I don't want to misspeak, Vish, so I'll let you answer it, but I have an idea.
So in general, the costs are based on a per user per month model. So typically, like a company like Stutz, like ECP, they have like a few number of super users, like we say, about 10 or 12 super users, like production manager, procurement manager, controller, CEO. These are super users that we charge about $200 per user per month. And then we have like the actual warehouse floor users that are just using the mobile apps, and that's about $125 per user per month.
Vish, isn't part of that cost going to Microsoft? Because
Yeah, and that includes the cost of the
license.
Microsoft licensing underneath that. Yeah.
But isn't there a variable cost if we run 300 production orders 1 month or we run 30, the cost is different?
We kind of roll that in, Fred. I mean,
Gotcha.
people
Okay.
wanted to find, as we work with more and more customers, they just wanted to see fewer lines in terms of their billing, and the billing wanted to be simple and not variable.
Okay.
So we evolved the pricing model as well, Fred. So from the time that
Yeah.
we worked with you as well.
And I heard at a regional meeting up at McCormick Fona in Geneva a couple of weeks ago, CEO of a very large company said, "Look, I got so much data, I can't get anybody. I don't have anybody to analyze it." So they were thinking about using AI as an analyzation tool, if you will, because they've got the data. And the answer's in there somewhere.
Mhm.
Let me ask you, how did you know when one team was ready to move on to the next process?
Very good
That's
question,
kind of
John.
easy.
Fred, why don't you answer that? I
Every
have my.
every day's management meeting, part of our management meeting, we discuss ERP. And if the guy in receiving said, I didn't have any problems yesterday for 2 weeks in a row, then, kind of self-serving, it's going fine. And the team spoke up and told us what their issues were.
So
Okay.
actually, so that's how Fred was viewing it. But internally, we use traction quite a bit. I mean, traction, getting a grip on your business. So one of the metrics that we do is, for example, in Stutz, right? Amazing. Their operations manager, quality manager. Her name is Sasha. Amazing, amazing lady. And we always used to track the number of issues she is reporting versus the issues that the guy on the floor was reporting, and we would track them over time. And when we knew that the number of the issues that were getting reported on the receiving was near zero, and the number of receivings that were actually recorded, they were receiving about 10 or 20 trucks a day. So when we saw that the number of trucks received per day is 20, but the number of support tickets that were raised in our teams was like less than 2 or 3, then we would know that they're ready to move on to the next process.
Okay. Well, you started with purchasing, right?
Yeah.
How did you make that decision to start with purchasing, and how did it affect the rollout?
You want me to go, Vish?
Absolutely.
If you don't have the raw material item numbers in the system, how do you put them in inventory? And you can't receive them until you buy them. So you got to purchase them before you can receive them. I mean, it's the initial first thing.
Okay, it's first thing into the funnel.
Yep.
First thing into the funnel. Yep. And then you do the production, and then you do the shipping.
And then you get paid.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. I've got a couple more here. I think, yeah, a couple, just two left. If you were advising another co-man who is still using spreadsheets and QuickBooks, where should they start?
Well, they investigate the benefits of this system and learning more in detail how it could fit their operation. To me, if you're going to do this, you have to at least free up somebody half the time. You can't ask everybody to do 5% of their time on ERP. Vish talked about Sasha. She volunteered to lead the charge, and she knows the entire system and helped train other managers who then oversaw the training of their operations in areas. So dedicating somebody that's very knowledgeable of the entire operation and is willing to become very knowledgeable about this. Now, she deals with quality and she deals with planning and procurement. So she's very broad based in the company to begin with. And she's done other functions. So that worked out very well for us all because she understood the whole company. She's also one of the longest tenured people there. My other thing that when you're going to start, and I don't know if you're going to ask me this later, but it's something that I remembered that is very important. Our other customers or other partners that we investigated, they always were like, hardware is your issue. You need to figure out what kind of barcode you want to use, what kind of printers you want to use, what kind of system, etc. And we were like, we're not the experts in any of that. We're experts in packing dried fruits and nuts. Vish's team had suggestions and helped us with that tremendously, and then had other select vendors that were willing to come and help us with that, which was a big help. And then on top of that, the other thing I would say before you get started is figure out how you want, how you want the computer system to work. So all of a sudden, in the middle of a huge factory, you needed a tablet to work. Well, okay, are we going to hardwire that tablet? Are we going to Wi-Fi that tablet? Are we going to have a spot? Uh, you know, I would advise figuring that out. So that was part of our delay of progress as we were going along. We had to figure that out later, and we should have figured that out at the beginning if you want to learn from our experience.
Okay. I said I had, before that question, I said I had two left. Now I've got two left.
Okay.
As labor constraints continue to challenge many businesses, how has the implementation of PC's ERP system provided visibility to areas of opportunity for implementing automation into your operation? Power
So
Central's ERP system is what we're talking about here. Yeah.
it's a pretty general question, but Power Central's ERP system lets you see things. Here's your raw material, here's your labor, here's your shrinkage of your packaging materials. So if you need to stop using people packing and use robots instead, the system allows you to see what kind of labor you're using for your whole team, and you can allocate then how much of that is packers, and then what would your savings be. And this, any system is going to give you the volume. The benefit of this system is real-time information. When you're making a major decision to automate things, that's a big level decision with a whole bunch of data from the past, and forecasting into the future. So it helps you see which pieces you want to work on, but all systems are probably going to give you the overall data that you need to work on with. So,
Vish, do you want to add anything to that?
Like Fred answered, right? I think, at every production level, we track like what is the expected labor cost and man hours that would take to produce that particular production run. And then when the actual production happens, they would enter that the actual hours used. And that's how we're able to track the line utilization value versus the labor utilization value. And that way they can, when they want to decide, hey, I want to put like an end case pack at the line, case packer at the end of the line, or any other automation, they're able to like really compare apples to apples in terms of labor cost. What is the actual labor cost that is saved, and come up with those numbers.
Okay. Okay, here's my last question. What would you do differently if you had to do it again? And Fred, you've already mentioned the hardware issue. So is there anything else?
well, having made the mistake the first time and having to do it over again, I wouldn't have just accepted the fact that you had to pay people hourly. I would have done more research in what other partners have. And, like I said, we accidentally stumbled on Vish from a different reason. We were looking at his Pack and Fresh company as being a packing partner with us. And my boss was on my case because we weren't doing well with our ERP. So he's got his ears open and he says, Vish, what's your ERP system? And he pulls them aside and shows them all this. And then I spent a long time at Vish's place learning about it. All I can say is go watch somebody else do it. If somebody wants to sell you a system or be your partner and they can't present you somebody that's willing to show you how they're doing it, then, that's like buying a car without a test drive because you read about it in a magazine.
And even to extend on that, John, like what I would also say is that one thing we've also learned is that watching somebody else do it on somebody else's product and you doing it on your own products is also another layer of um, discrepancy that, you got to know that this app works for this mac and cheese company, but does it work for this fruit and nut company. And that's what we learned as well, is like, for example, when we worked with more complex food manufacturing companies that do batching and pre-batching and cooking and all this kind of stuff, some of these apps did not work for them, right? So we had to go and actually rewrite some of these applications to fit the needs of their processes as well. So one of the things that we are also learning to start doing is, instead of like, yes, for a company that is about $10, $15 million, it's going to cost about $100,000 or so. But can you try this with like a few $1,000s? Can you actually load up your own items and actually test it out and before you spend the big bucks on it? So that's one thing that we just learned after we worked with Fred and Stutz on. So we actually offer like a very minimal $5,000 opportunity for them to engage with us for about 4 to 6 weeks, for them to load up these 3 or 4 items and work through the process the first 6 to 8 weeks, and then have their own people tell them, yes, this is actually going to work for us. Not just that we saw with another company, but this really works with my own salsa manufacturing company or my own ice cream company.
And
Gotcha.
I can add to that. I mean, Vish has never asked us to do this, but if he had somebody that, wanted to come sit with one of our, like Sasha, and say, okay, I got a new product and it's going to take these 3 ingredients and it's this bag and this packaging, and watch her put it in the system and then watch her receive it and then watch her make a production order of it and ship it, and see that in the system. There are people that are good enough, and she's one of them, that could put that together and show you that in a couple of hours, and like, whoa, this isn't that hard, so.
Thanks, Fred. Really appreciate that.
And so, Fred, kind of what I heard you say earlier, and I hit this on the initial introduction with the CPA. It's the networking that got you to Power Central, which
Yes.
is what, I've said it before. Our members tell us that networking is the #1 benefit of belonging to the CPA. On a scale of 1 to 10, some of them will tell you it's a 12. So with that said, we'll wrap it up. We'll give a few minutes, 5 minutes back to the attendees. I want to thank you and Fish, Fred, for sharing this and being transparent on the total system, et cetera. And the CPA wants to thank all the attendees for investing some of your time for this learning opportunity. Remember, a short survey is coming quickly, so please respond. And there we go. That's the slide I was looking for. Feel free to reach out to any of us. If you have a question, we'll try and get you an answer. And we hope to see you at one of the CPA events in the near future. Thank you all. Bye for now.